All right. We good? Thumbs up, Andrew? Okay, perfect. So welcome. I wasn't really in charge of this particular session, but we'll do it this way. That's fine. So we thought it would be fun to put together, instead of inviting someone to teach us about professional development, to actually use the stuff that we already do as professionals and see if we can collect some ideas from each other. I mean, I think when we're at our best when we're sharing ideas and stuff. And over the years of doing this, being part of this group and this conference, this seems to happen a lot, either with research or teaching or Christian living or whatever it happens. We share a lot of ideas with each other, and it works well. So I thought we would try that with this professional development stuff. So just so we're all clear, the vendor room, which is literally to my right, is talking about digital classroom stuff, virtual kind of assignments, that sorts of things. So that's more your bag. That's where you want to be. This one is going to look at diversity, inclusion, specifically how we do that in the classroom, in our curriculum. If we've learned anything over the last year, it's that we need to try to be more inclusive and diverse, hear other people's voices that don't sound like ours, that don't look like ours, that don't believe like ours. And a lot of the higher education literature is suggesting that that needs to be intentionally built into the curriculum and into the assignments and all that sort of stuff. If it's not, and I think Ibram Kendi in his book would How to Be an Anti-Racist would agree that if you're not intentionally trying to be inclusive, then you are being exclusive. So I think this is a valuable discussion, and particularly with some of the stuff we'll be doing in C-Skills over the next handful of years with diversity and inclusion and those sorts of things, which I think is going to be part of Andy's leadership as he assumes the presidency later today. So we're just going to have a conversation on some best practices. I'm going to start and with a little assignment that I do, and I think the way this works, we kind of just share ideas and then maybe get some feedback, ask questions. Can we ask or can we suggest ways to improve it? Maybe too. If you think, oh, that's not a great idea, then maybe give a different idea that would be a better idea. And just kind of go from there. Jordan Schools is going to go next and share something that she does, and then we can open it up from there. So we have till about 15 or 20 after sharing. That's plenty of time to get some good conversation. Okay, all right. All righty. So I'm going to go over to the other computer in the room and share this screen here. A second. Oh, that's fine. Okay, so turn around so you have a look at the back. Just to kind of set it up, our department here at Lipscomb, it's Department of Kinesiology. We have 3 primary majors, or 3 total majors, exercise science, fitness and sports studies, and those 2 are very, very similar as far as the courses that they take, and we also have sport management. And this discussion is valuable for me, although I am not an exercise scientist, exercise physiologist by any means. How you include diverse voices and be inclusive in an exercise physiology lab class, I have no idea. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. So I would love to hear suggestions. You know, how do you do that in a lab class? Fortunately, I don't teach those hard science classes. My background is sports psych, sports soc. I also have an MBA, so I teach some business classes in our department also. And one of the new ones that I picked up and taught it for the first time, if you're looking at my Canvas page, was in fall of 2020. And so definitely turning the waiting room off later in the day. So one of the assignments that I included in my effort to get students thinking about diversity inclusion and what that means, and Lipscomb is a fairly diverse campus. I think last time we were at 30-ish%, 30 to 40%, 30 to 35% racially, ethnically, internationally diverse, which is much higher than the state of Tennessee, outside of Memphis. However, most of our majors tend to be fairly not diverse. So this is the assignment that I came up with. I don't know if it was a good idea, and the students, I think, liked it. So I had them do a book review. I had planned on doing a book review. I do this in my graduate level class. This is an undergrad class. It's a 4,000 level class, so it's all seniors. All 3 majors take it. So we got exercise science, fitness and sport studies, sport management, all in there. And students can take it as an elective also. And I wanted to do some kind of business-based book, right? Like a Good to Great or something like that. Something that's really well known, something that's very popular, to get them thinking business-like. It's not a business class, it's an administration class, but entrepreneurship and business is a piece of that also. So I decided to include my kind of inclusive and diverse component of my class as part of the book review. And in particular, I wanted to choose books that were written by diverse people. And so that's what I did. So I'll show you the books that I chose. They'll all pop up here. I don't know if you have heard of these books, if you have read any of these books, maybe a little bit bigger there. So Carla Harris is a bigwig. She's an executive. She speaks all over the world at C-suite kind of things. We would never be able to afford her as a speaker at a C-Skills. She's one of those that's making a lot of money. And she wrote a book called Expect to Win. Natalie Hurt, another, I believe, African-American woman, wrote a book called Future Proof. Tony Dungy was, I think, the only name that our students recognized on here. And he has a few books, and I think The Mentor Leader, that's my favorite of his. I think it's really, really good. Malcolm Gladwell, one of my favorite authors, and a lot of people wouldn't suspect that he is BIPOC, but he is. Jamaican descent, I want to say, Malcolm Gladwell. Also Canadian, I also want to say. And Outliers is, that's a fun book too. So, and then 2 more, The Wealth Choice, which was about, by an African-American gentleman, about how you build wealth from basically starting from nothing. So his story is in there, and it's really good. And another kind of classic book that I had not heard of before, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? This, of these 7 books, is by far the most explicitly talking about diversity. And it's actually an old book, written in the 80s, when most C-suites everywhere were dominated by white heterosexual males. Still, and now today, they're still dominated by white heterosexual males, but it's a little bit more diverse. And so this guy, Reginald Lewis, made $1 gazillion at the executive level, kind of pushing against that grain as an African-American male. And so the title of the book kind of gives you a sense of the demeanor of the book. And it's a lot of fun. It's a really fun book. And then another African-American female, The Year of Yes. And I'm blanking on kind of the synopsis of that one right now. So those were the 7 books. And I'll be honest with you, it was hard to even find 7 books by business people, business leaders, Tony Dungy types out there that would also work in a classroom for undergraduates. So it was really, really, it was tough. Even that was kind of a learning experience for me. I think I left a couple on the cutting room floor. These were the 7 that made it. And then the assignment itself, just so I know how I did it. This is a group project, by the way. And so they do it in groups. And if you want to get students complaining, have them do a group book project. First have them do a book project, then have them do a group project, and then put the 2 together. And they're going to complain a whole lot. So was this the video assignment? I think this one. Yes, they actually, because we were, when this one was due, we were virtual after Thanksgiving. So this was a video assignment that they did. They uploaded as a group and then dropped online. So have them create an executive summary, a long executive summary, and I thought that I put that on here. I guess we just talked about that in class. Wanted them to intentionally speak to what does it mean that this author is coming from a background that's not like most of us, right? What does it mean that they grew up differently, how they pushed through and stuff like that. And for the most part, the students thought through that really well. I was really happy with how they kind of wrestled with this is coming from a diverse background. I was very clear at the beginning what the point of this assignment was, to kind of think about business and these different areas of business, leadership, administration, all that sort of stuff, coming about it from a background that is different from ours. So where they talked about that most, I think, was the personal applications and the professional applications. They say things like, I never would have thought of from this perspective, you know, whatever that happened to be. And in fact, in this class, good mix of males and females. I don't think we had any African American, Asian American, Mexican American, Latino students in there. So it was pretty white across the board. Me as my half Puerto Rican was the most diverse person in there. So anyway, that's what I did. They seemed to enjoy it as much after the fact. They seemed to enjoy all five. There ended up only being 5 groups because of the size of the class. They all said that they would recommend, probably the greatest praise for a book, they would recommend to other people that they read that book. I think the Malcolm Gladwell got the highest reviews, and then the Why Do White Guys Have All the Fun got the second highest reviews. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback and comments on that particular assignment. What could be better? Questions, ideas, that sort of thing.
Matthew?
Yes.
First of all, Lori's posted something really, Lindsay's posted something really cool in the chat, but one of my first questions for you is, this sounds like a great assignment, gets the kids thinking. Are you intentional though, when you assign these, letting them know why you're assigning non-white, specifically non-white men, although Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, is a white male, but Jewish, I think. Do you let the kids know ahead of time why the assignment is designed the way that it is?
Yes.
Or is it you just assigning books and saying, okay, guys, we're going to read this. Now tell me what you think about their perspective from a different angle?
Yeah, no, they knew going into it that the reason I selected these specific books was to get that different perspective. And so they kind of knew and had that lens going into the book, understanding that was part of the point. How do you think about administration? How do you think about leadership? How do you think about business from a diverse, inclusive kind of way?
Okay. Was there ever any pushback by the students on like, why are you having us do it from this perspective, or do they kind of get it?
Not to my face. I think more to the assignment in general, because I didn't want to have to find another book. And I think I probably told them also that, you know, in trying to research textbooks, I would have loved to have found it. And that, you know, that's something that we've talked about at our university and other places. Try to use textbooks that come from diverse authors. Couldn't find any in this. For one, there's not many really good kind of kinesiology administration books. There's one that was written about 25 years ago, so it's kind of outdated. There weren't a lot. So this was kind of a way to do that. I forgot what your question. No, so there wasn't a lot of pushback. And after the fact, unless they were just writing, thinking they knew what I wanted to hear, they really didn't express that either. That this was so terrible. So I was happy with how it went, and we'll do the assignment again, but we'd love to be able to tweak it.
So this was just the first time you did it?
First time I taught the class, first time, and I know. So the professor that taught it before, I had him as a professor who taught the class. He'd done it for like 30 years. This was the first time I taught it. He was, most people got A's in his classes. We'll say it like that. So they kind of came into this knowing that it's going to be a different experience because someone new is teaching it, someone different. So that there was a lot being thrown at them in this particular class, including this assignment. that was very different than anything they would have done. Other thoughts? I think we'll open the chat here. So Lindsay mentioned that there's a tool that we all now have students make notes about reading. Interesting.
Yeah, we use Canvas as well. And this is, so like if I create an assignment and this is an external tool, you know how you can have them submit it, you know, as a, you know, text box or, you know, and so I choose this external tool. So I think it kind of depends on the institution if you guys have the hypothesis as an external tool. But I really like this, like, because it allows the students to highlight a document and then annotate it, or you can, like I've done assignments where I just say, highlight the, like I have a question in my research class, highlight what are the dependent variables, and then they highlight it. Or, you know, annotate how this applies to your life and what you're doing. So it's a great tool. I just put that out there if anybody's interested in looking at it.
I appreciate that. It sounds like a good way in a group book project, maybe for them to see if they're highlighting the same kind of things, if they're hitting the same kind of topics.
The downside, like I said, is you have to have an electronic copy of it so that you can upload it as a PDF. Or if you're using a website, I think there's an option that you can put the website on there. So, yeah.
I'll have to look into that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dale mentioned Tony Dungy. Yeah, Tony Dungy works really well with just about anything.
Matthew, I'm just curious as to whether or not in this class you use the discussion board element in Canvas to either entertain open public discussions or private discussions about the books.
No, but I really like that idea. I've not used discussion boards very much, period, in classes. But yeah, that would, you know, because I don't know how the students are communicating before they start putting it together at the end.
Yeah, I mean, you as the instructor can look at everything they write, but you can also give the students the ability to see what each other are writing about said book. And I guess the other question might be, ultimately, what did you want to accomplish with this assignment?
Twofold. I think the foremost thing, we have to hit the learning objectives of the class, which is to understand about administration, leadership, business. And I wanted them to think about that from a perspective other than the one that they grew up with.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I've always done, particularly when building a new course, is that, you know, I make it a point to talk to colleagues that are teaching comparable courses, in particular at HBCUs, because they're faced with the dilemma of giving students a lens that is not particularly all Black. Like at Howard Business School, 90% of your classmates are Black. You're interning in Black establishments. But what's the practical truth here? That's not where you're going to go. Corporate America does not look like that. Government does not look like that. Law does not look like that. And so it may be helpful just to contact others, you know, in the academy that are teaching comparable courses at sister institutions.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. It'd be nice to have a resource that pulled these things together.
Well, again, and that's something as we think about our own C-Schools DEI efforts. Maybe that's an idea up the road a little bit to start a resource area.
Absolutely.
In which we get good books, you know, we can again slide them that way.
Absolutely. I'm glad Andrew is here writing that down. Oh, thank you, Stephen.
You weren't supposed to hear that, Andy.
Hey, that's why I'm here.
I'll put another link up there. I haven't played with this at all, and I don't know if anybody else has, but I'm curious if anybody's used it. And so I watched a little video on this, but basically it's a discussion post and it says pros and cons, but it could be over a topic, you know, whatever the topic is, a diversity issue where you might have a question and it always is bumping up the discussion to the response to, or if people are responding more so to one comment versus the other, but it also allows students to see both sides of a story. And I just haven't used it, but I thought, wow, if anybody's used that, that seems like a good way for students to see what others are thinking, you know, because I don't know about you guys, sometimes in a discussion, the students like, oh, I know I have to respond, so I'm going to pick one and that's it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's used this tool or not.
You know, Matthew, and that's something else that I was thinking about with your assignment. I think it's good just to get them to think about something from a different perspective. I'm always afraid that when they take that other perspective, they think they've got it. And now they might understand something from how Tony Dungy portrays it. And then they think that that's like the new way that I should be thinking about this. This is the new way. And so perhaps, you know, a way like Lori, oh, sorry, Lindsay, I keep calling you Lori. Lindsay is articulating here is to get them to think of a different perspective, but also articulate that that's not the only way either, right? That just because you read Tony Dungy's book doesn't mean you understand the struggle of an African-American coach. I believe the first one to ever win a Super Bowl title against Lovie Smith, who was also an African-American coach for the Chicago Bears. I remember that. And so, you know, always pushing them to kind of think differently, think more nuance. Like Steve was saying, like, you know, the world isn't black or white. Even if I internship in a black establishment, I'm going to have to deal with others in other areas. And so my question earlier about the students and their pushback, like they might walk out of that saying, okay, I've got it now. I've got diversity. I understand, you know, what it's like now to be an African-American football coach in the NFL almost 20 years ago now. So just another thought that I had though, and I'm kind of losing it is, you know, when I as a white male teacher bring something like this into my classroom, I guess I want to know, were you nervous about it? Was there hesitancy on your part to bring it up? Because even your experience is different than mine, right? And so Stephen talked about going and getting resources from other academics. I often look to my students to gather resources. What have you guys read? What have you seen? What is out there that you're aware of that I might not be aware of? So how was your experience, I guess, as a white male navigating that space as you made this assignment known to your students?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I usually start with my story, and Landon knows a little bit about my story than other people do, but there's three of us, three siblings, and my brother is black and my sister is Mexican. And so I usually start with that, the kind of more to illustrate, I've lived this, I've thought about this. That doesn't make me a black business person by any means, but it is something that I've thought about. But at the same time, I'm still learning. We're still learning what all this means. And so while I have read these books, I think I have a good grasp of the business side of it, what that message that they're trying to say, how we are more inclusive and diverse in our thinking. We're all learning this together. And so we're not going to all have it figured out. I think where I could really strengthen it, and it just didn't happen because of the way we did it virtually. At the end of the semester, we circle back around and maybe hit some of these things that we've discussed today. Now you have this perspective. What is still missing? What do you still need to learn? What do you still need? What other perspectives do you need to maybe learn about to feel a little bit more complete in your understanding? Complete's not a good word. A little bit more, I don't know what the word is.
Diverse?
A little bit more diverse in your thinking. But probably the idea that we'll never be there entirely. So yeah. But I don't want to take up a whole lot. Oh my goodness, I took up a lot of time. Let Jordan, should be able to share her screen. I'm going to move this view. Thank you for those suggestions, the conversation. I'll point this towards the audience now.
So you guys would think that after, what, a year and a half now doing Zoom classes, and I would like have it figured out. There's always a moment where I'm pretty sure my screen's not going to share, and my PowerPoint won't go full screen, like every single time. All right, so I brought Joey up here with me. This is my husband, Joey. For those of you wondering, I feel like I also need to give a disclaimer, as Dr. Sullivan did yesterday, right? I'm a white female. I have lived in a multicultural setting my whole life in parents do mission work, so I lived overseas. So from that aspect, I get parts of it, right? But I'll never be able to fully understand that lived experience. It's just wasn't my reality, so it's not what I can. My reality, however, though, is that I'm a female in a very male-dominated field. That's the way that it is. So while I can't fully understand that reality, I can empathize because I've had those things said to me, or I've seen kind of the roadblocks with that. So while Matthew kind of talked about the aspect of bringing in content and what that looks like, I'm going to assume for a minute that you have got that all figured out, okay? Your content is beautifully diverse and inclusive, and now you're just looking at the classroom setting and what that's going to be. So that's kind of where we're going to pick up and take off from there. All right, so the first question I'm going to ask is, what do you consider, everybody can kind of answer back to this, what do you consider that makes a diverse and inclusive classroom? What is it? If you were going to say the word, the thing that it is that you believe makes a diverse and inclusive classroom, what do you think that is?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Fundamentally, I think a diverse, equitable, and inclusive classroom seeks to hear from all voices. And again, understanding that maybe not all voices are included. And then I try and stay as humble as possible and understand that I might get it wrong and I might not know everything.
Yeah, I think that's great. Anybody else?
Well, Jordan, I think that there are two things, and this has been my lived experience, being an African-American professor, teaching predominantly white graduate students. I think the first thing is being accepting of everybody's truth, including mine, but also theirs. I think the second dimension is from the beginning, creating a safe space to celebrate everybody's individuality, who we are as a collectivity of people, but also embedded in this idea of that safe space, it's a space where everybody can speak their truth, as long as within the boundaries of the course. So it's bounded.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think as we kind of go through this, you're going to see maybe my bias, we'll call it, but my belief on what that looks like, and kind of that safe space that Dr. Waller was talking about, what that looks like for me.
All right, so I'm going to take over. My disclaimer is I am Jordan's husband. I was at Judson a couple of years ago, and I unfortunately missed out on the past two conferences, but my disclaimer is that I grew up in Section 8 housing in the predominantly minority area, and from there I married into a family who went overseas doing mission work, and so I've spent a lot of time with minorities. However, that just doesn't make me an expert by any means. And so here I want to talk about that diversity. It includes multiple aspects of a person, and not just like the main ones that we all hit on, like the race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and even, we're getting more into the ability as far as, persons with disabilities and things, but also like socioeconomic status. We need to think about in the classroom, what can these people afford? We are in a world where we're starting, here in Tennessee, we have different programs that are allowing more access to higher education, but that doesn't mean that these people are ready to come in and pay these big bucks for the textbooks. And then groups and various identities that people identify with. Southern by the grace of God. There's all these different groups. Whether you're an athlete or you self-identify as just even like a nerd. These people who are coming in and saying, hey, I really like going and focusing in on these studies. Those groups have that bring that diversity into the classroom.
Yeah, so one big thing to kind of point out with that is with this identity process, right? There's, I think, Dr. Waller kind of touched on it, right? The truth behind that. So each of these people are bringing in their own view, their own experience, the way that they live, the way that they function as people, and that brings about a lot of times a stigma, right? We have an idea of these people. I say all the time, right? Like, if I was a bad student in your class, my name's Jordan, you would then not assume that every Jordan for here until eternity would be a bad student, right? They may remind you of me because of that name, but you wouldn't just assume that. But we often attach a very strong stigma to groups, to identities, to practices and people, and even races, right? Like we attach that. We see it happening all the time. And a lot of times, or sometimes, that can be isolated towards events, right? One event happens, 9/11, right? And we have a very strong stigma attached to Middle Eastern people. And then as time goes on, maybe that lessens a little bit, but maybe not in the region that you're in. So it's very dependent on that person and on that space that you're in. So my kind of claim for that safe space is a caring climate. So how do we work around that? How do we create an environment for our students that they can really strive in, right? They can succeed, they can grow, and they can do big things in that environment. A caring climate is said to be the extent to which an individual perceives a particular setting to be interpersonally inviting, safe, supportive, and able to provide the experience of being valued and respected. I would argue that all of us as professors, right, that's our goal. That's what we want. That's the ideal. This idea of them being able to feel valued, to feel respected, to feel like what they bring to the table and their voice matters, their truth matters. But we can't do that when we create a space that is not welcoming, that is not inviting, and that is not accepting and willing to learn and grow together. I'm quick to say, right? I don't know it all, right? I'm open to say that in my classroom, and I let people know that. But what I want us to do is to be able to grow together and to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. They say growth happens on the other side of fear and discomfort, and I want to encourage my students to kind of lean into that. So what does a caring climate look like in a university? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about two different aspects of that. First is the micro, and that's our classrooms. It's important that we're creating a safe space, this opportunity to have healthy discussion, while also simultaneously teaching respect, right? We're respecting while we are willing to see each other's truths, while we are willing to see each other's points of views. And I can understand that yours is different than mine, and that doesn't devalue mine, but I'm not allowed to devalue yours either, right? It's a mutual respect and care for each other. So that happens within the classroom, and the way that we choose our content is one of those ways, right? The way that we speak to our students, that's another way. We have lots of ways that we can show this care in the classroom. But then there's the issue of the macro caring climate, right? And that's our university system. And that one gets a little bit more tricky, right? Because we don't have control over that. If you know me at all, you know that things outside of my control are not my favorite things. I'm very much so an 8 on the Enneagram, and I like to be the one with my hands in it, because then I feel like I can help make that change, right? If I'm there, I can be a part of that. And if it doesn't happen, then it's on me. And so with our university systems, we need to have that buy-in. And sometimes that comes from really awful, difficult, long, drawn-out conversations. And it comes from explaining the need, right? But also being able to demonstrate that, to show. I'm not going to tell you that I have a great way for that, because it's been, it's a struggle. And I'm not going to also tell you that it's impossible to have a good caring climate in your classroom if your university system isn't on board. That's not true. It's not impossible. And I think a lot of times, for myself personally, that was my excuse at the beginning. I kind of turned inward and I was like, well, if it's not going to happen on campus, I don't know what to tell you. We just can't do anything about it. Kind of wash my hands. And that's not the case. If nothing else, my students can know that in my class, that is a space where they can grow and they can learn. And, you know, we're going to correct and we're going to teach, but we're going to be loving and respectful in that process.
So one of the big things about creating a diverse and inclusive classroom is access. And so there's a lot of things that we have to think about. And I kind of mentioned already the cost of textbooks. You know, I teach in business, and there are a couple of textbooks that I've come across, and I've been like, man, these are great textbooks. And then I see that they're $80, $90, and $100. And I'm just like, I know the struggle that I went through buying these textbooks. And so I don't want to have to continue that cycle. And so I'm starting to try to use more open source material, or use things that, you know, are priced a little bit more in in a better category for these undergraduate students that I'm helping. Another thing is a shared library. This is something that we saw work really, really well. Jordan actually started a shared library for athletes up in the ARC, which is like the athletic facility at Johnson, where athletes could come up and basically take a book and either use it right there or, you know, bring it back the next day if they had a big assignment due. And it was really great because it actually got a lot of buy-in from some of the teachers as well, given some of their you know, older desk copies or just them outright buying a copy for the library. So it was really awesome. Also, there's other you know, the library on campus. You can put a copy of your book on reserve, so that there's always a copy there for them to be able to use. And then one thing that I've noticed, and you know, I was also an athlete in college, and there are some assignments that professors give, but they say, okay, you can't really start on that because I'm going to give you further instruction down the road. Well, 2 class periods before that assignment's due, the instructor finally gives the instruction, but we're heading off to a national tournament, and so, you know, there's not really that time frame. And so there's those things that we need to be mindful of, you know, for those groups of people as well. And then also mindful language. And this kind of ties in with some of those other resources. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have sat in the classroom as a student and the teacher says, you know, who here has not gotten a textbook yet? And, you know, they're calling out the students that, you know, those are the people who, you know, are probably coming from a socioeconomic status that's a little bit lower. And so they're not able to afford it. They're trying to figure out, do I need this textbook or do I need this textbook? You know, they're making those hard choices. And so we want to be mindful of that. And instead of saying, you know, who here doesn't have it, you know, say, hey, if anyone hasn't been able to get the textbook, you know, come see me in my office later on. Or, you know, shoot me an email and we'll try to figure something out so that, you know, you don't get behind on those assignments coming up. And this is kind of where we want to go and get more of these ideas of how we can, you know, create more access in the classroom.
Yeah, I think our big thing is to be able to take away from that is really when we're talking about mindful language, having a conscious awareness of your classroom, the diversity in your classroom, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, all of these things, and understanding the background that they're coming from. When we use that pointed language, right, we're calling out when we're choosing to use technology, and we're saying, oh, get with your group and pull out a cell phone, and then everybody's going to take this, you know, Kahoot quiz. What if they don't have a cell phone? What if they don't have a computer? And it's embarrassing. It's an embarrassing thing. I can tell you that. I was not a student who didn't have those things. I was very fortunate. But I've worked with students who haven't. And to be able to have to come and sit in a classroom or sit in an office and work and do your papers right there, everyone knows why you're doing that. Because if not, you would be, in the cafeteria working on it with everyone else. It's an embarrassing aspect of that. And so I try to be really mindful when I'm doing group projects, when I'm doing different assignments and things, to make sure that the access is equal for all, that everyone has the same amount of access to the things that I'm assigning, to the books that I'm giving out, all of those kind of things. Joey was kind with the textbooks, $80 and $90. God bless business. We're hitting 300 over here. And also, how many times y'all have said, oh, I think you're going to really want this for your library. Oh, I say it all the time. I'm like, you're going to want this in the future. That's great. But when the English professor just assigned a $200 book, something's got to give. And these are not child purchases, right? These are adult number purchases. These are purchases that as a married couple, when I have to buy a book for my PhD program, I'm like, oh, you hit me in my gut, right? And we're asking them to make these decisions 5 times in a semester. So just being kind of aware of that. That's all we have for you guys. We'll kind of open it up for a couple questions. What are ways that you've created a diverse and inclusive classroom, a caring climate? What are some things that you guys have kind of implemented?
Can I just say real quick, Joey and Jordan, with the library for the athletes, I think that's great. But with the 3 textbooks I use in my religion and sport class, I just make sure that our library has a copy of them.
Yeah.
And I am not good, like you just said, I am not good at being mindful of my language when I talk about the textbooks, because I often just get frustrated that they haven't gotten them yet. And I don't even remember that I ordered them for the library so that they were there. So thanks for that. And, as much as I try and do this, yesterday, I started off class. I hadn't seen my students all weekend. And I brought my daughter to camp yesterday, and I started asking everybody about camp and their camp experiences. And about halfway through the discussion, I realized that all my white students were talking about their camp experiences, and none of my diversity or African-American athletes actually in the class, none of them said anything. And I just I thought to myself, that was not the right question to ask. I didn't have to bring it up. I was just trying to, make a connection, but then I realized that I had kind of stepped in it and overstepped a line. And I'll have to apologize, I think, on Wednesday when I see them again.
Yeah, and Andy, I think your mindfulness there, the times that I've messed up and said something, or, I asked about a parent, assuming, I'm just in my frame of reference, right? I'm talking about my mom and dad, and that's great. That may not be somebody else's reality. And that reality may be very painful for them. But it's hard when you get caught up in the moment. Like you said, you just want to have a connection. I just, I want you to know I care about you. But my care is, hurt deep.
We got about 5 minutes for discussion.
Okay. We have about 5 minutes left. Anybody have any questions?
I was going to say, one of the things I try to be aware of, I guess, in my classroom is, especially if I'm pulling videos or anything like that, to try to make even my videos of people from different backgrounds. So the students, we predominantly are white on our campus. We're in West Texas. And so I want them to have some diversity as best as I can. So that's one of the things that I try to do.
Yeah, that's great.
Just kind of piggyback off of that. One thing that I found that I do that I didn't realize I was doing it when I did it is that I asked the students to provide like a YouTube video describing the concept that we were going over in sports psychology. And sorry, little buddies here. And so when I did that, I noticed that most of my students that were African-American were finding videos that were largely African-American videos. And it's not that I hadn't seen those movies, it's just I hadn't thought to use them as an example. So it was really powerful for them to use their own language.
Yeah.
Can you hear me this time, Andrew? Yes. Okay, good. Couple of things. One, Andrew, I'm in rec, we talk about camps all the time. And so I've become a little more mindful of saying summer camps and sports camps, because most of my students have been to some sort of sports camps, but they don't connect the dots with Kanakuk and what they've done. So try to connect it for them up front. The other thing is And this is a kind of a rhetorical question to chew on, not for us maybe to answer it, but I think we do a pretty good job. You know, we're becoming more aware of racial and cultural diversity, but very specific to our group is religious diversity in terms of, and your institution may dictate it in a way that you don't really have this, but I've become very uncomfortable in my class saying the Christian worldview on this point is. Because quite often I have Christians in my class who may come from a very evangelical conservative background, but I may have some that are what some would call maybe progressive Christians from a different church background. And can I teach in a way that both of those students feel comfortable in my class at a Christian university? And I think it's a problem opportunity for us that we have to be mindful of as well.
Still, I agree with that. And I think also, like, what disservice are we doing to our students to almost assume that they're never going to come into contact with someone from a different religious worldview than us. So even if everyone in my class, right, at my institution, everyone, and I just, kind of assume that, right? Let's just say that was the case and everyone is, well, then where are they going, right? Where are they going to coach? Where are they going to serve as athletic directors? What does that look like for them? And what disservice are we doing to just stay completely in our bubble?
Yeah. If I could add one or two final comments, I think it's brutally important to really wrestle with everyone's intersectionalities. And again, to Dale's point, something is hidden as religion. Again, frames a conversation about ethical business practices and about morality in governmental or business organizations. So I think it's important to really not only talk about those physical things that we can see about a person, but all that stuff that's merged together and messy and hidden that makes students squiggle and squirm, but that's how they grow. And the other thing that I would add is, the best textbook you can have for a course are however many students you have in that class. When you enroll in a course, you lose the right to sit there silently for 16 weeks. They have to engage. And Jordan had me for class. And, one of the things I do is I walk the room and I have conversations with people that are catalytic. And when something is offered, then I move to another part of the room and engage 2 or 3 more students. So sometimes it's about our pedagogy. But I think the big thing is don't be afraid to attack the topic, because in this world we live in is extremely relevant to our student success that we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in meaningful kinds of ways. It is hard for them, and I realize that, but it is equally hard for me as a Black professor. Looking at 30 people from the South, I'm from the North. Tennessee was never on my radar to come here and stay for 17 years. But that's where God has a bag full of jokes he pulls out every now and then. But the bottom line is I'm here, they're here. And in between that, it's an incredible education. And that's why I make it a point to get Vern in my classroom and Andy in my classroom and Dale in my classroom. And again, people that don't necessarily look like me. It was interesting to hear Eric Bain-Selbo talk about the fact that, and I never knew that about Eric, that he grew up in a housing project. Now, here's a guy that was the president of the American Academy of Religion, Sport and Religion section. And he's talking about his days of playing in the housing project. And you talk about diversity. And the alarm went off yesterday, and it made sense to me why he writes some of the stuff he writes.
Can I share a quick story? I know we're about out of time, but I'm teaching a class this summer, and so I did an intro, and kind of out of my wheelhouse, to be honest, but it's a diversity class and for higher ed. And so my introduction, I talked to him, I'm introducing myself, and I'm listening to myself. First, I grew up in South Africa. I was married to my first husband, who passed away 11 years ago, but he was a high-level quadriplegic. My second husband was born in Brazil, but he immigrated when he was a young boy. But his family line is Jewish German. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is a crazy circle of people right there.
But that's also great material to offer. And
Yeah, just add to that. There's more than the appearance than meets the eye. So when the students find out, I served in some of the roughest areas of America, west side of Detroit, west side of Chicago, south central LA, then to Asia, served most any type of diversity culture you can think of, American Indian and so forth, Latino. Yeah, I come from a lily white background, I'm a doctor's kid, physician's kid. I probably act like it, look like it, but we have a wonderful diversity at Concordia. I was going to add to Steve's comment there. I teach religion, not just sports, and we do come with there's a truth that we as confessional Lutherans say there is a truth. I have kids from Muslim backgrounds, have Asian immigrant students that never even been to church before. They went to church for the first time at one of our Easter services. And so I come as a learner, but I also come as a person that knows Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. And I want them to know how much I love them in Jesus. I'm not trying to judge them, but I want you to know what I know. And so it's a challenge, because I've had students that on my evaluation, they'll write some, yeah, he just hates gays, hates homosexuals, or I had Wiccans in my class, hates pagans, and so I don't want to come across as unloving, but I also have to say there is sin, and how do you teach the truth in love in a diverse culture, in a world that doesn't believe in truth? So that's our challenge.
Yeah, well, thanks, Vern, for leaving us with that particular challenge.
Hey, Sugar McLaughlin.
Yes.
Thanks,
Sugar, go Sugar.
I thought this was very fruitful, so thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here, and actually, if you were gonna stay around for the presentations in this room, I need to reset the Zoom. So thank you for your contributions, and we'll see you again at 10:30.
Thanks, everybody. Good stuff.
Yeah, thank you.